everybody. We are truly pleased to have you with us today for an exclusive Deloitte LHoFT webinar special edition with Dr. Mark Suskas, Director of Innovation, on how to thrive in the new normal, design better ways of working. A little bit about Mark's background. Mark is Director in the Strategy Department at Deloitte, where he currently works with senior leaders to deliver strategy, growth, and innovation for their organizations. He leads Deloitte's innovation practice and as a greenhouse facilitator guides executive teams through interactive experiences designed to solve complex business challenges and achieve innovative breakthroughs. As an author of The Art of Opportunity, published by Wiley in 2016 on how to design and execute new growth strategies and ventures through strategic innovation, he's a sought-after speaker and advisor on the topic of growth and strategic innovation in established organizations. Mark holds a Doctor of Business Administration from Alliance Manchester Business School, where he led research on how established companies innovate and transform their business models, and holds a Master's of Science in Strategic Management from the University of Vienna. He's also a co-founder of the Business Model Gallery, the world's largest business model database. Besides his corporate work, Mark is on the faculties of Duke Corporate Education and TEC de Monterrey as a founding partner of Territory Global. On the moderator side, we have our co-host and colleague, Alex Panican, Head of Partnerships and Ecosystem Development at LHoFT. Prior to joining LHoFT, Alex was a serial entrepreneur, creating companies in the space of e-commerce and the like. He holds an MBA from the University of Quebec in Montreal, where he also taught marketing and strategy as a teaching associate for almost 5 years. At LHoFT, he's been traveling the world, connecting fintech entrepreneurs with the local ecosystem, and has been a master of ceremony, interviewing thought leaders from all walks of life. Sirs, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you for the kind introduction. I do have the best job in the world. I'm saying that almost every day. Hello, Mark. Hello, everybody. So, Mark, I think we talked like 2 months ago. I've called you at the peak of the confinement to have your advice and brainstorm with your team at Deloitte. There was Francesca on the call, Julia, Nadia. And we talk a lot about the future of work because it's something to work remotely, but how to work remotely as a team. And if possible, in an efficient manner. And I still remember we had this fascinating discussion about the findings you share in your book, but also about our common passion for military strategy and how special forces have adapted their strategy in Iraq, Afghanistan, and they managed to build the most efficient organization on earth, the famous teams of General Stanley McChrystal. And the discussion was so good that we decided to do a webinar on the subject so everybody can benefit from expertise, but they can also participate into this discussion and we can generate more brain power. And we have a lot of brain power today because we already have 44 participants on the line. So Mark, thank you so much for taking the time for us. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Alex, and thank you, Anthony, for the introduction. And thank you to be here today with us and use your lunchtime for this webinar. So we covered the introduction already, so I'm going to skip that. The most burning question for everybody on the webinar is probably, will we get the slides? Yes, so don't worry, we will share the slides afterwards, so that is already taken care of. Now, the key question that a lot of companies, and maybe you as well, and we as Deloitte, we are also wondering about these days is, how can organizations thrive in this new context, which is COVID-19, with the remote work and all these things, but also in more general, how can we thrive in these fast-moving, digital, and very technology-driven worlds? And in our point of view at Deloitte is that you have to address this challenge from two perspectives. So on the one hand, you need to think about what is called here transform your business. So it is about creating new growth businesses, being innovative in how you create growth, remodeling, reinventing your business models, focusing more on customers, these kind of things. And on the other hand, you also need to think about how can you transform your organization. And here we're talking about transforming your culture and adopting new ways of working. And this is what I would like to discuss today, this transforming your organization through new ways of working. And what I propose is to look at this through three different lenses, if you like. So first, I'd like to go a little bit into why do we think there is a need to reinvent the ways you are working, what is driving that need. Then I would like to spend some time on discussing what are these new ways of working, and then I also invite you obviously to join in, and we have a couple of polls and questions in between. And then finally, give you some ideas, some principles on how you can transform your ways of working. Because here the experience and the learning is that if you want to move your company towards new ways of working, it does not work well with the traditional old ways of doing change management. And so new ways of working might also then require new ways of how you do the transformation. So, and I hope that's okay with everybody, that covers your interest, and please feel free in between to just drop a line, your questions into the chat. We can address them throughout, or we can also then, I think we have some time at the end to pick them up at the end. So let's have a look at what is driving the need for new ways of working. And I'd like to start with a little bit of a short poll to get some insight from you guys, what is happening in your companies and whether you are wondering about any of these questions, or if you're a consultant, maybe your clients are wondering about any of these questions. So I'm just going to open the poll so you can just pick one of these four, or maybe option 5 is all of these. So the question is, does your organization struggle to move quickly, and what can you do about it? How do you empower employees to make them take more responsibility and be more customer centric? How do you organize for operational excellence, cost efficiency, and innovation at the same time? Right? Or maybe you're also wondering about how can your organization sense changes in the market more rapidly and adapt to these changes also more quickly?
Can everybody see the poll?
Many are responding, so I guess
yeah.
yes.
So we have about 50% voted. So if I may ask the others to pick something. So we have a lot of people saying all of the above, and then the Organization for Operational Excellence, Cost, Innovation-Driven Growth is kind of at par with sensing changes and responding to these in the market. Yeah, just maybe 3 more seconds. 3, 2, 1. Let me close the poll and quickly share the results. So here you see what you guys come up with. Yeah, so I mean, it is fairly distributed. A lot of people are all of the above, and then, as I said, how to sense changes and respond to them quickly, and how to organize for operational excellence and innovation at the same time seem to be the very hot topics, closely followed also by how to empower people. Good. So let me briefly outline why we think you need to think about reinventing how you work, what is driving that. And I have 3 key arguments. The first one is the complexity in the environment and the uncertainty in the environment. The second argument is that the way we work is very outdated, the way we organize, the way we manage. And if you don't believe in the complexity, and you might not believe in the ways of working being outdated, my third argument is going to be that those who have already adopted and changed their ways of working, became more agile, more customer focused, they have reaped tremendous benefits. So we're going to look at these benefits. So let's talk about military. It is actually a term that comes from the military. So trying to mobile device. Trying to think about the environment volatile, which means that it changes a lot. You need to react quickly. Being uncertain, this is all about you don't know what is the right action, you don't know what is the right decision to make. Being complex, so in terms of cause and effect are not very clear, so it's difficult to know if we do this, is it really going to lead to the results that we expect? And ambiguous, so in the sense that it's very open to interpretation. There might not be hard data that tells you exactly what you need to do. And what you see on the right It's a framework called the Kinafin framework. It's a Welsh professor who invented that. You see the link there. It's a Harvard Business Review article where it was first introduced. The article is already a couple of years old, but I think it's becoming more and more relevant. And basically what the model says is that if you are on the lower part, on the audit, your situation can be simple or it can be complicated. And no matter what it is, the usual way of how we think, how we are trained to think about gathering data, performing an analysis, formulating a response, and then implementing that, it works well in simple and complex in complicated environments, right? Because we know them, we can analyze them, and we can formulate a course of action. Now, the problem is that the more we move towards the upper part, be it complex or even chaotic, you can no longer gather all the data you would need. The data is, as it says there, ambiguous, right? So you cannot really figure out what is the right course of action. So there is the uncertainty, there is the complexity. And what that means for the way we work, manage, behave is that you cannot spend your time with analysis, but because you're never going to finish. So you need to act and probe first. So the first thing you need to do is you need to act. You act. Your action is going to trigger some kind of reaction, right? And then based on that, you can see what works, what doesn't work, and you need to adapt. Which leads me to my second point, the way how we work and whether that's outdated or not. Now, let me start with a question. If you look at this org chart, what year do you think it is from? And please just type the number into the chat. I'm going to give you a couple of seconds to do that. What year do you think is this org chart from? Yeah, we got 36, 98, 60, 80s, 2020, 2020, 1980, 1920, 80s, 2000s, yeah, 1916. Quite a broad range, right? Now, let me ask you a different question. If you look at these pictures, when are they from? So again, you could just type it in. Now we got 1915, 18th century, 1910, 04, 40, 1900, 1920, 1920, 50s, 1920, beginning of the 20th century. Yeah, so these are actually all around 1900. Ford T model, I think it came out in, what was it, 1906, something like this. The phone was a little bit later. And so these are from the 1900s. Now, why is it that if I show you these pictures, you're very clear about when they are from, and you immediately see that these things are like 100 years old? But if I show you an org chart, it could be today, but it could also have been 100 years ago, right? And this is actually Pacific Railways from 1920, right? So the difficulty is that we don't know, right? If you look at an org chart, we can't tell it's 100 years old or it's just from today. So this is the point that I'm trying to make, is to say the way we manage is fairly outdated, because a lot of how our organizations still work is based on that thinking, which is actually more than 100 years old. I think Taylor wrote his famous Scientific Management even before 1900. And what we have to remember, I think, is that this way of working and this way of managing, it was also just invented in a particular context to solve a particular problem. And at the time, the problem was that more and more people went to work into factories. Nobody had ever worked in factories because this was new, so they didn't know how to do that. And at the time then, it made perfect sense to say, okay, we need some people who need to think about how we work in a factory, and then we need other people who are, at the time, they were not educated in this type of work. We need to tell them how they need to work. And so it made perfect sense for Taylor to come up with the idea to split that thinking from the execution and to set up an org chart where you have very specific roles, because then you can tell everybody exactly what they need to do. Right? So I think that's something we need to keep in mind. We always think that the way we work and the way we organize is kind of like given, it's a law and we can't change that. But this way of working was invented for a very particular purpose. And today, this purpose and the environment has changed. So whereas industrial management, it's all about efficiency, scale, stability, standardization. Today, very often, as we saw, if the environment is more complex, we need different things. We need more agility, we need innovation, speed, we need to be responsive, and we need to be resilient. I'm not saying that industrial management and all these things, efficiency, scale, optimization, standardization, are not important anymore. What I'm saying is that these days we try to put everything more in this industrial management way of thinking, or we try to solve our challenges with industrial management thinking, whereas we might need something else. So it's not either or, but it is about thinking where in the business, where in the organization do we need more of the industrial management type of working and managing, and where in the business might we need more innovative and other ways of working. Now, if you're still not convinced by that, here is my third argument. So there are an increasing amount of statistics and results that prove organizations who have become more adaptable, more customer focused, they reap tremendous benefits. So you have a couple of numbers here. You might think, yeah, consultants always say that, yes, a lot of these studies are by consultants, but there is also an increasing amount of studies by academics who are more objective and who are impartial, and they can track these things along among multiple companies and larger samples, and they come to the same conclusion. And there are some good studies, and if you're interested, I'm happy to share this now. Now, I think two key things here. The first thing is that if you don't do it, well, you miss out on the benefits. But also, if you don't do it and your competitors do it, then you're really going to be left behind and fall behind those who do these things. Especially as we see a lot also in the talent area. I think we have a lot of HR people on the call. So, I mean, it has been proven that these new ways of work, they can boost your employee engagement up to 30%. So also for talent, for the war of talent, if you want to engage talent and keep on to your best talent, it might be worth to think about these new ways of working. So much for a little introduction. Now, again, question over to you. So if you think about these challenges, what are the challenges that you see in your organization? So, or in other words, what is keeping your team, your organization from actually doing its best work? And a second question, if you want, might be, so what will happen to your organization if you keep on working in the old traditional ways of work? So I'm just going to give you another couple of seconds. Maybe you want to put a 1 and a 2 in your answer, and just fire along in the chat what you think. Autonomy and control, so the tension between how autonomous are we and how much control. Taxation for cross-border commuters, yeah, so legal challenges. Are we too big to be agile? Culture, yeah, it's going to disappear. Resistance to change. Conflicting incentives. Not much in the near future, yeah, so that's also an interesting one. So if not much happens in the near future, does that mean that you don't need to do anything, or might you still need to adjust and adapt? Lack of engagement, leadership mindset, lack of a futuristic vision, have a kind of a target picture to look to. You will be disrupted if you don't do anything. Yeah, leadership, commitment, engagement, instead of leading with example. Yeah, don't know how, yeah, uncertain future, will keep low margin, the organization won't develop itself. Yeah, good, excellent. So lots of challenges, and my argument here is that, okay, you need to, or maybe it's worth looking into transforming the way your teams work, your managers lead, and your organization operates to solve these challenges. Now, what is the new ways of working that I'm talking about? What are the characteristics of these new ways of working? Now, at Deloitte, we have a concept, we call that the adaptable organization. And here are the characteristics of these organizations. So first of all, purpose-driven over only being profit-driven. And I'm going to go a little bit more into the detail of what I mean by purpose-driven. Being customer-focused, working in an ecosystem, having, instead of a hierarchical structure like we saw on that 100-year-old org chart, have a flexible network of cross-functional teams, be very collaborative and agile, instead of the standardized one-size-fits-all talent management, have more individual talent engagement strategies and activities. And instead of resisting to change, adaptable organizations, they are open, they are looking for change and innovation and continuous learning. So obviously all this sounds great. Now the question is also how do you get there? And to get there, you need to work on three different layers. So you need to work on your organization, so really think about how you organize, how you operate. You need to think about the role of your leaders. I mean, a lot of the challenges that we just saw were leadership mindset, leadership engagement, and so on. So the role of leadership has to change, or it changes from being an expert, having all the answers, to more of a facilitator and orchestrator. But the core is really that the teams need to change how they work. So if you want to build an adaptable and agile organization, the core building block is really to have high performance teams. We're going to talk about that a little bit more. Now, if you want to go on the way to becoming an agile, adaptable organization, there are principles and capabilities that you need to master. And just as a reminder, so if I say principle, what I mean, it's a rule or a belief that guides our behavior. And for new ways of working, if you go through the literature, if you talk to the companies who have done it, who have applied new ways of working, there are 5 fundamental principles that keep on coming back. Now, the first one is be purpose-driven. Now, by purpose, I don't necessarily mean things like sustainability, or you need to be good for society or environmentally friendly. That can be good purposes. But what I'm talking about is something much more mundane. So it could be something that for a call center, answering a client request within 10 seconds can also be a purpose. But the thing is to have something very clear that your team needs to accomplish. So your team needs to have a mission. This is what we're here for. This is our task. This is what we're going to do. And what we see more and more is that these purposes, they are not built on, it's for us to make profit as a company, that's a byproduct, but these purposes, they are very customer focused, and they focus on user outcomes. So what are our customers trying to achieve, and how can we help them? And that is then going to be the purpose of your team and of your overall organization.
That would be my point. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Mark, but I mean, most of the banks, and have very good friends who work in the banks, and the purpose and the meaning is we want to make more money. And as humans, I don't think that's the end goal of our life, making more money for the banks or for our clients. So yeah, if we can come back later on that.
No, but I think you're right. I mean, then the purpose for the team is, I mean, if you are a team and you think about my purpose is to make more money for the shareholders, it's maybe not so motivating, and that's why we see a lot of disengaged employees throughout the world. So I think the purpose here, and also in banking, we see it change a lot, that the purpose becomes more and more to serve the customers better, to serve them more, make their life easier. There was a couple of days ago, there was a huge tweets and huge followers and reposts on how the neobanks are able to open an account in a couple of hours instead of having to a couple of days. So that's also being very customer and very purpose driven. So to be able to open an account in a day or a couple of hours, that can also be a purpose. This is very linked to the second point I'm making, is that you should focus on progress and outcomes. So it's not so much about focusing on processes and procedures, but the important thing is the outcome. And ideally that outcome is linked to a customer outcome. And then, as we mentioned already earlier, if it's about a complex environment, you need to act, you need to experiment, try things, and then you learn and you adapt. And something that is very important here, where we see a lot of debate always, is that, should we do this or should we not? And here I mentioned the rule of safe to try. So make it safe to try. If it's small, the impact of it going wrong is not too big on your business. And so it's safe to try. Then you don't need to overanalyze it, but you can just do it. It needs collaboration. So another principle is collaboration. It's cross-functional teams, but it's also collaboration across the organization. It's collaboration with your users. It's collaboration with your ecosystem. So I wrote down sponsored users there. It's a term that comes from IBM. It's Enterprise Design Thinking Framework, where they say we only build a feature into our software if we have a sponsor user. And so somebody who really said, yes, I want this and I'm ready to pay for it. So it's not about building something that might, from a technical point of view, be very fancy, but it's really to focus on what your users want. Another one is about what I called here work in the open. So it's about complete transparency in communication and in sharing information. I mean, there might be here and there are legal limits, but very often we see that by default it's closed and it's only on a need to know basis. But what we see in really high performing teams, agile organizations, is that access to information is free because you never know who knows. And Alex actually mentioned Team of Teams. So the book by the General McChrystal, where he describes how the military had to change its way of working to be able to compete, if you like, with Al-Qaeda. Right? And in the book, he describes how he installed what was called the Operations and Intelligence Meeting. So that was 6 days a week, a 2-hour meeting with up to, at some point, 7,000 participants, call 7,000 participants, where they shared all the information that was available. So they went completely away from need to know and everything is top secret to we share it because we never know who can do something with it and how we can connect the dots, right? And this is also, he also describes in the book that 9/11 was basically possible because the different agencies, they kept all the secrets to themselves and they didn't share. So here they reversed that. And by the way, I mean, lots of companies now during remote work, they have turned to Teams and Slack. I mean, the very purpose of Slack, and in Slack, actually, the channel is always default to open. So if you want to make it private, then you have to explicitly make it private. And once it's open, it doesn't go the other way around and you cannot switch back and forth. And so the key idea is that if you have something like Teams or Slack, everything is open. All the discussion is in the open. So if you're not prepared to do that, then there is not really any use in using Slack or Teams. You could just as well stay with email and have that one-on-one conversation. And the fifth element that I mentioned here is, I call that be people positive. So here it's all about you trust the people, you trust the teams that you put in place, that they work on the purpose, that they work towards progress and outcomes, that they collaborate, and you give them the autonomy and the end-to-end responsibility and the execution power that they can actually work on these things and do these things. Again, Team of Teams, as we mentioned it, they did communicate, so the open communication, they did that for a year. And after a year, they said, okay, now we think everybody has what we call shared consciousness. So everybody knows what we're really trying to do. The purpose is clear. We started collaborating. Now we give the execution power to all these teams, so they don't need to ask for permission any longer if they want to do something, but they can just do it. Now, to get all of these things, where are you in your organization? What do you think? So how well is your team or organization doing on these 5 principles? And again, I would invite you to just put in the chat 0, you don't do any of that, or 10 would be you got all of this 100% in place. Just going to give you a couple seconds. 40, wow, that's cool. Matteo, we're going to talk about what it is that you are doing. So I got 5, 0, 8, yeah, 2, 3, 8, 20, 30, good. Yeah, so a couple of people are already very advanced. Others, they have challenges. People positivity and trust is a challenge here. Yeah, good. And maybe, Alex, and we can call upon some people who are very high on the numbers and let them tell us their story and how they do it.
Yeah, just after. Yeah,
that's right. Just after. So, how do you get there? I mean, in terms of capabilities, what do you need to learn? So, as I said already, I talked about teamwork and collaboration. So, I think you need to start with high-performance teams. Right? And a high-performance team, so that's the key building block, as I said earlier, of how work gets done these days in organizations. So that's where you should start. And what are the characteristics of a high-performance team is that they have a clear purpose, they are aligned on the purpose, they have a clear feeling of membership and team identity. I know that in business, we very often say, I'm part of a team, but actually what we're talking about is rather more a group of people in a department, for example, and not really a team where I say we all have a shared identity, clear membership. In most teams these days, it doesn't matter if you're on one team or the other, and it also changes often quite a lot. Characteristics of these teams, so there's high trust, mutual regard, openness in communication, clear roles, clear processes, clear goals, disciplined execution, but also very spontaneous interaction, and also recognition and celebration of successes and each other. Second point, second capability is everything that has to do with adaptability and agile. So I'm not really talking about, it doesn't have to be safe or Scrum, but the principles and the work, the mindset of agile working. So working in sprints, working fast, focusing on outcomes, focusing on progress. So these are the key elements here. And the third one is everything that's around human-centered innovation and problem solving. So because we said being people positive, being aligned to customer needs. So the human-centered or design thinking gives you all the tools you need for these things. It's again very focused on process, on progress, very focused on outcomes, empathy, being there for your customers. So I think that these things, if you work on these three, or if you have a look at these three, they give you the tool set and the methodologies that you need to start building high performance teams that can work according to the 5 principles that I outlined above. So that's it for why and what. Now let's share some information or some ideas on how the transformation should work. And as I said already earlier, I think the key thing here is that we see that a lot in organizations, that management says we need to change the way we work, we need to change the way we organize, but then they try to do that in the traditional industrial management way of working, if you like. And that also needs to change. So some of the problems that you guys mentioned earlier, they can be addressed through having a new approach to the ways you do change management and transformation as well. And in an agile mindset, if you like, here are these overstatements. So focus on outcomes over procedures. I'm going to go a little bit more into the details, but just to give you the high level. Start small over a big bang, top-down imposed change. Invite over enforce, and top-down versus over bottom-up. This might be a little bit counterintuitive, but I'm going to come to what I mean by that. Now, outcomes over procedures. This is a slide from one of my colleagues, John Smart from Deloitte UK. So he says outcomes, it's all about being better, producing more quality, sooner, so everything about flow, time to market, increasing the speed, throughput. It's about safer, so safer is more quality, it can be more compliant, less risk if you're in a financial services environment, for example, and happier in terms of happier clients, so more satisfied clients, but also more engaged and more happy teams. And so outcomes to focus on, and then we also offer some KPIs, some metrics you could use to measure these. And the thing here, the important thing here is actually that you should balance these 4, and it's not about either or this one instead of the other and sacrificing one for the other. Start small over big bang. So here the red curve you see there, it's the traditional change management curve. So usually when you do change management, it's top-down announced. What happens is that there might be some people who are enthusiastic about it, some people they are afraid about it, and then you have a little bit of energy maybe going up because you see the vision and wow, a bright future on the other side of the fence, if you like, and then the hard work starts and everybody's getting tired and you fall into this change management hole, and then it takes a lot of time and energy to grab out of that again. So the idea here is that you start small, again, you focus on one team, one department maybe, you learn what works, what doesn't work, and once you have something that also works well in your context, in your organization, then you start scaling it up. You deliver results very fast. I mean, if you think about these big bang transformations, you're not going to show a lot of results until like a year, 2 years, 3 years, maybe never. And here, through these small interactions, you finish. I call that here ability to finish. So right from the beginning, you produce outcomes, you focus on outcomes, you achieve those, it works well, other teams get interested, and they jump on the train with you. Again, invite over enforce. So if we think that organization innovation follows the normal innovation adoption curve, you should not try to do this for all of them. You should not try to convince your skeptics or your late majority first, but start with the people who are interested. And in every organization, there is a group of people who is very interested. So start with these, invite these in, and then as they prove that they can produce outcomes, that this is better, that this works, then you scale up and you create more and more momentum by involving more and more teams.
What's missing on your graph, Mark, is the resistance. Sometimes they can also bring some problems because...
Yeah, sure. But again, that's why I say you start with those who want. And maybe it's in a small area. Maybe you focus in strategy. We often say you don't focus on the area that's going well, but you focus on something where it's not going well. So you don't have anything to lose if you start working there. And then, as I showed here, so you involve more and more teams. So you could also say that these hooks going up, it's the number of teams going up that we involve in the initiative. And then, yeah, leadership team is team number one. So top down, we addressed that already before when we had a couple of comments around that. Ideally, you start with your leadership team so that they understand what is this new way of working, why do we need it, so that they buy into it. And they also start showing the behavior, but they also start learning and experiencing what it means for the teams who are actually going to come after them to do that. And we actually have a couple of clients where we start exactly there. So we start with coaching the executive board on these new ways of working, and then that can trickle down if you like. Now, if you don't get the executive board, at least on the business unit level or on a department level, you should there start with the management team or the team of the leaders of the various teams you have in the department, something like that, because it is going to be important for them to know what is it that we're trying to achieve and what are the guidelines that we want to give. So involve them as much as possible. Ideally, you start at the top. Now, I spoke a lot about these teams. Obviously, at some point, it's not only about having all these teams, but the rest of the organization also needs to change and to adopt. So you need to change your organizational design with all the governance that's in there. It has impact on talent strategies. What are the type of people that you recruit that come? It has impact on ways of working beyond just the team, but everything that has to do with budgeting, workplace, contract management, and technology, obviously. So you start with a team, but then you gradually move out, and obviously all the other parts of your organizational system need to change as well, which is also very different to how we usually do change. So the traditional change management, if it is more top-down, then you start doing all of these things, and very often the last thing you do is then you start working with the people that they behave differently. So again, start with a team. My call to action to you guys would be you start with one team. A good methodology that has proven to work very efficiently in real life is that first step is you train them. So training is all about creating awareness and inspiration for new ways of working, showing examples, outlining what could it be, discussing the principles that are outlined, discussing the capabilities that are outlined, for example. And then as a second step, and we often do that together, so we have a 2-day workshop. Day 1 is more the learning, and then day 2 is already on the how can we apply this new way of working, what would we like to try. So here also, in terms of being people positive, focusing on outcomes, giving them the autonomy, let them decide what they want to do. So it's not about imposing, you need to do Scrum or you need to do SAFe, but you inspire them, and then you let them decide what are the things that we want to try out. And maybe the first sprint, the first 3 weeks, it's only a small part that they want to try out, like the weekly planning, or maybe it's just having the daily stand-ups. And then as the teams grow confident, it leads us to step 3, you support them throughout the implementation through facilitation of these key meetings or giving them coaching. You support the gradual application of more and more of these principles along the way. So here again, it's invite, it's not enforce something on them. So again, the way you do it should already represent your the 5 principles that we discussed about. That's it from my side. So I hope it was so far helpful. And
thank you so much
for questions.
We're going to take some questions. I will jump in first, if you don't mind. Just coming back to your last slide, Mark, because again, I'm coming back to our discussion on regarding special forces. I mean, those guys, they are very motivated because they have to apply. They train for years before applying. They are selected. They are trained. I mean, those guys are what we call la crème de la crème.
Mhm.
Honestly, you believe we can take any teams in organization and make them as efficient and as motivated?
Well, that's what I mean, and actually I wrote a post about that on LinkedIn the last week, I think, that in teams of teams, yes. So he started with high performance teams, right? You're right. So these guys, they have gone through training, very selective process to become part of special forces, and then in these special forces, even more training. But the key thing of these trainings is that they foster teamwork. So if you think about the Navy SEALs, and he describes that very nicely in the book, the training is geared towards building a team. So that's why here I also say you need to start with building a team. So what does that mean? It's about building trust in that team, for example, having a clear purpose, knowing clearly who is in charge of what, who is doing what, having clear rules and having clear procedures. So that's why, and I'm 100% with you that in most organizations, even if we call it team, it's more a group of people in a department. As I said, it's not really that high performance team. So that's why you should start with that, creating that high performance team.
Okay, the core, as you said. But coming back to, I mean, we are in a world of remote work today, and some companies, even in Luxembourg, some banks will not go back to normal before maybe next year. How can you build this trust when everybody is working from home? I watched a documentary, I told you last week about it's called the Red Army. It's about the hockey team of former USSR. And those guys, they lived together for years before becoming the best team in the world, but they knew each other, families, and it's the same stuff for the special forces. I mean, they fight together for the team mates, for the team members, not so much about the country or ideology. How do you build this kind of trust? Is it possible to build this kind of trust remotely?
I think what is trust, right, in a work setting, if you like? So I think there are two or three components. One component is obviously, for me to trust you, I need to know you a little bit. Right? So I don't need to know all the details of your personal life, but I need to know you a little bit. But the most important thing on a personal level, let's say. But then the most important thing is that I need to trust you. I need to be able to rely on you, and that means that if you promise something, you do it. Right? So there is no hidden agenda, and I can actually rely on you. That is going to create trust, and I don't think that that has anything to do with at the office or remote, right? We can just as well do that in a remote work. I mean, if we have a call and you tell me, Mark, I'm going to send you that until Friday, and I get it on Friday, then I can trust that you do what you say, right? And
Yeah,
that is going to create trust as well. And then, and trust, and that also, being able to rely on you also means that you have no hidden agenda, and there is no backstepping and all these things. So that already helps a lot.
Speaking of trust, Anthony, can you give the word to Gwen Bondi? Because he said that he's in organization. The main problem is trust. Please, Anthony.
Yes, of course. Gwen, get ready, please. Go ahead. Gwen Bondi, you're on mute. Go ahead. Hello, Gwen.
No, doesn't want to talk.
No.
Okay.
A couple of questions, and if I look here.
Yes. So go ahead. Pick the one you want. Maybe
well, here's one about
the word. Yeah.
No, it doesn't necessarily have to be a department. Yeah, so depends a little bit on your business and the way you're organized today, but it also could be a function or people from a function, or even across functions that work on a particular outcome. And so we've done many projects where we worked with teams to install end-to-end responsibility over a process. So here you don't necessarily start with one part, but you start with a couple of people who are working across that process. Again, with the idea in mind to focus on outcomes, an end-to-end process view might be might be helpful. And then you might need a team who consists of people in procurement before it then goes to purchasing, and then it goes to delivery and invoicing and the payment of the invoice. And so that could also be a team. So in SAFe, they call it, they talk about value streams. So really, again, focusing on the outcome, focusing on who do you need across the board to be able to focus on these outcomes. And if you then go to a level of like an ING who has adopted this agile model of organization, so here you really have cross-functional teams who care about and focus on one particular product, solution, outcome, and they cover the entire process. What else do we have?
Maybe we can ask Christoph to intervene. Christoph Baronheit, please. You can ask your question.
Yes, hello everyone. My question is the following. Based on your experience, have you seen leadership teams able to actively challenge themselves, maybe to a point leading to the replacement of many of their old style members?
Yes, I also have seen that. I have I actually described that in the book, a private hospital in Switzerland, where the managing director went so far to fire everybody who was not on board with him. So obviously he did not do that right away, but after like half a year, and he saw that these people are not playing along and they're not in the new mindset of what he wanted to install, the people had to go. So up to that point, even, yes.
Perfect, thank you so much. Maybe can also ask Mathieu. So Mathieu Giacome, are you still online, Mathieu?
I'm here.
Yes, Mathieu. So you put 40 and then you retracted to 4 on 10. We want to ask about your experience. Why
My
did you
bad,
put
because it's my bad because no, I saw the figure 100%, so I thought that was a percentage index. I'm really shameful. But from my experience, we're a small team, so we have no problem with communicating and trust. But I wanted to know, because you used a lot of comparisons with military procedure, and I wanted to know, because the task force, the commando, that's a part of the army, but the most part of the army was, especially in the 20th century, simple conscript. How do you manage them?
Yeah, so as I said, I think we made some reference to that because Alex mentioned the book. I mean, there are other books or other theories who talk about agile in a more business setting. I think the interesting thing is also, so in the military, if you think about it, the military is one of the oldest and probably most hierarchical organizations that you can find. Right? So in most business organizations, although we have the org chart, there is this formal organization, how it is drawn on paper or on a slide, but then there's the informal organization, how work really works, and there's a lot of cross-functional work and not always that going back and up to get a decision, which is the case in the military. And I think the other, so, and yeah, he did it for the special forces, for like SEALs, but they did it also for a larger audience. And the idea was to say, we have these individual teams and they can perform so well, we just need to replicate that on a larger level. Right? And the second thought that I have to your question is that, again, as I said earlier, maybe it is not for everybody, and maybe you don't need it everywhere in your business. So my invitation is not to say, let's overthrow all of how we work today, and it needs to be new ways of working. But what I'm saying is that you need to be more differentiated where to do it and where not. I think there was another question around not everybody wants to have this and likes to have this, and you're right. So it is really about, again, inviting people and thinking about where does it make sense and where does it not make sense. If you are, I don't know, you are an insurance company and the claim processing, you don't need to be particularly agile and innovative in claim processing. I mean, there is a standard process. There are rules and regulations also from a legal side on how it needs to be done. And here the objective is still scale, productivity, standardization. So it makes sense. You have to think about where does it make sense to do this and where not.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Mark. We have a question from Najia. Najia, please, if you can ask your question.
Yes, hi everybody. So my question is more related, to the skills for this to hire, we can say, or to invite the first we can say leaders. And I have the impression that it's not everybody can be hired for that, because it needs some courage to innovate, willing to discover new way of doing job, we can say. You have also the level of risk appetite at the level of the individuals, I would say. So what do you think about those skills? I mean, because you really have to find the right balance between innovating and executing at the same time.
Thank you, Nadia.
Yeah.
Mark,
So again, I think it's really, first of all, thinking about where does it make sense? Where do we need the people who are more innovative, and where is it complex, and where don't we have a clear answer and we actually need to be innovative, and where not? So that's already a first thing. And then, in my experience, usually if you ask in the company, you're going to find some people who are willing to do it. And again, it's the principle of inviting people over enforcing it. So those who want to do it, you invite them in, you work with them, you give them the tools, you give them the training to be able to do this. So again, it's more the invitation than the enforcing. And those who are not willing to do it, so maybe you find some part of the company where it works, and maybe it's also a learning curve for them. We had one client we worked with, and they had a department where they said, first they did Scrum, so they kept the old hierarchy and they started doing more agile ways of working, so people learned about that. And then at some point they jumped to this giving the team complete autonomy, and they eliminated all managers and everything in the team. So they just had one head of the team, and then everybody else was said, you're going to do self-management. And a lot of people were very overwhelmed with this, because suddenly now I have to make all the decisions. What happens if I make a wrong decision? And I'd rather have the opinion of my boss. But there are also in these organizational models, if you talk about holacracy, for example, is a new innovative way of how to organize. There are rules and or guidelines on how you can deal with these issues. So, for example, even if you have to take a decision in holacracy, there is the rule that you should consult others who are impacted by the decision. So you're not kind of left alone with that decision. So I think there are ways to mitigate the risks that you're talking about, and this feeling of being overwhelmed by all the self-management autonomy that you get. And again, if we take Team of Teams as a good example, what we see a lot in companies these days, like the example that I mentioned, so they went very quickly to let's give everybody self-autonomy without really preparing people and the team necessarily to get to that point where it was possible. So in Team of Teams, he describes that they did the communication for a year. 1 year, 6 days a week, 2 hours per call of information providing. Before they said, now we believe everybody has enough knowledge that we can give them the autonomy to make their own decisions. So what we see a lot in business these days is you have a team, they go to a Scrum training, and then they get all the autonomy, but they are not well prepared. They don't have everything around that is necessary to go that way.
Thank you, Mark. One last question from Jung Sang. Jung, are you with us? He might not be with us. Okay.
Questions about learning agility, learning from failures, and stop the learning loops. Yeah, so it's all about, I mean, that's ways of working. These agile ways of working, they include the retrospectives, the reviews. So that's all about having cycles of learning on, I think that's something very important also in Scrum that's missed very often. You learn on the outcomes you produce, you review the outcomes, the work you do, the deliverables you do, but you also do the retrospective in terms of how did we work as a team, and how does our way of working work, and do we need to change anything there? So when we went as our team of the innovation team of Deloitte, when we went remote, we also had these cycles of learning. How do we adapt to this? And now we do everything online. So we used Microsoft Planner to have a board with the weekly deliverables. And we also switched and changed these things. The first week we had stand-ups in the morning, then we had stand-ups in the morning, and we had stand-ups to close the day. And then the team said, well, we think we just keep the ones in the afternoon. And now we also redesigned and we fine-tune what we do during these stand-ups, the kind of questions we ask, the kind of discussions we have. So that's all part of the learning.
Thank you, Mark. So Abby, we are running out of time, so be very brief for your question, please.
Thanks, buddy. Mark, quick question. I know this is a rhetorical question, right? Today's world, people are supposed to be 50% managers, 50% leaders. But I'm still saying there's a lot of people who are still only wearing a managerial hat and not moving to the leadership hat. How do you convince those people to move along?
Thank you.
Yeah, so I mean, it's something that I touched upon. It's this having that discussion around, if you want to change ways of working, what is the role of leadership then? Right? Is it that managing? And for me, managing would be more the command and control type of work. And so talking about these thought leaders from the 1900s, there was the French gentleman Fayol, and he was very clear on the roles of a manager, and like half the list is only about control, planning, and these kind of things. Right? So
but Mark, the problem. Sorry, Mark, to cut you short. The problem is these people know all of this, right? They themselves still don't want to change. It's the ingredient inbuilt DNA. I mean, it's a difficult question. We might not have the right answers to this. But is there any ways in methodology? What would you suggest from your experience and your wisdom?
Well, in terms of methodologies, again, it's an invitation to think about it, right? So to reflect upon these things. And again, as we said earlier, also, you're not going to get everybody, right? Not everybody wants to do it. Not everybody is aligned with that. And then again, also, you might not need everybody. It's just like you don't need everybody in a company to be innovative or be an entrepreneur. You need some people who do the standards, they follow the rules, procedures, and you need other people who think out of the box and who are agile and who are more innovative. So it's really about finding that. And it's maybe also about, so if I can reformulate the question is, instead of trying to turn everybody into a leader, you think about what are the strengths of those who are managers and where can we use that strength to the best of what we need in the company. Right? So there too, in terms of the principle of being people positive, it's also about acknowledging the strength that these people bring and think about how you can value that and use that strength.
So don't change the people, use the strength as they are. Thank you so
Thanks,
much, Mark, for the wisdom.
Don't take those who don't want.
I have like 10 other questions for you and as our listener today, but we are running out of time. We're gonna do, I hope, another session. One of my last questions was regarding education, because it didn't change since industrialization, and that should also be maybe more innovative and more agile, but we'll do it in another session. So
it's interesting that you picked that up. There is a lot of, if you look at social media, there's a lot of discussion about business schools and the elite universities in the US at least needing to change their model as well. Right?
Exactly, because they didn't change for the last century anyway. So Mark, thank you so much. I will just give the mic to Anthony to close the session. Anthony?
If you have any other questions, feel free to just drop me an email. Right?
Yes, I just want to show you briefly what is coming up in terms of webinars in the upcoming weeks. So next week we have fantastic speakers that we're bringing in, an expert in geopolitics on a new geopolitical landscape and global opportunities to seize post-COVID-19. And then I want to briefly emphasize on our FinTech Friday, which is a virtual gathering that we organize every single month for our community. We will have a fantastic speaker, a VC, a renowned VC from the UK, speaking during a fireside chat together with Nasir Subari, our CEO. So don't hesitate to subscribe and meet us there. Back to you, Alex. Thank you.
Thank you guys. Thank you for being part of that. Thank you so much, Mark, for taking the time for us and sharing your expertise. Hope we're gonna do a round 2 with you. Thank you. Have a nice day. Keep safe, everybody. Enjoy your weekend. Bye-bye.